Welcome to the Stream of Art podcast. Join me, Robyn.
And me, Michelle, as we chat openly about personal growth, creativity, and building a career in the arts. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 26 of the Stream of Art podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about regret and shoulds. But first, each of us will share a win, a challenge, and a fun or interesting thing from the last couple of weeks. Do you want to kick us off there, Robyn?
Yes. So a win. We finally we're getting our bedroom kind of set up, which has been on our list of things to do for the past couple of years. So I repainted and we got some closet organization stuff, which is I've discovered organization is my happy place. So it feels good to just have crossed that off the list. Challenge, I'm going to skip that one because I don't really know. I haven't really been doing any art related things recently and I've been just kind of taking it easy. So there hasn't really been many challenges. Something interesting. Well, you know what? Okay, so I started watching a show called Lady Bird. I hope that's what it's called. Really, really good show about the 60s scoop. And it's following the story of a young woman who was adopted from during the 60s scoop or whatever, adopted out of her family. And it's kind of following her journey as she discovers her history, essentially. It's really, really good. Anyways, yeah, just very heart-wrenching, hard to watch, but such an important story. So highly recommend it for anyone who might be interested.
And where is that? I assume it's streaming somewhere?
Yeah, I think it's streaming on Crave, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I can't remember, though. I'll find a little link to it. And the streaming platforms sometimes always change, right? Sometimes they're here, yeah. Sometimes they're there. But yeah.
Cool. So for my win, I actually had a bunch of wins over the last couple of weeks, but I'll just pick one. And that is that I started writing a new song.
Woo!
And it's a little bit of a funny story about how it started. So it is actually inspired by the title of a chapter from a book I just listened to called We Are the Luckiest by Laura McKowen. And she has a chapter called A Nice Little Life. And I loved that chapter and I love that title. I'm like, oh, that could be something. And then maybe the next day I was in the shower and I get a melody attached to a chorus line revolving around that. And of course it's the start of my shower. And I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna be here for a little while. I can't forget it. And it's the worst thing when you have an idea.
Yeah.
And, and some ideas I can kind of cling to long enough that I can wait until I'm done and then go write them down. But when it comes to a musical idea, so I'm just if it's towards the end of my shower, I can just, sing it over and over and over again until I get out, until I can get to my phone and do a little voice memo. But I was I'm just getting started. I just put conditioner in. I'm I'm going to be here a while. So I had to climb out of the shower and drip all over the bathroom and go to my phone. So I've got a voice memo on my phone with the melody and the first lyric of the chorus and the shower on in the background. So yeah, but then I took the time to start working on it. I've got, one of the verses written and I have the chorus written and I have a lot of the structure done. So it's been really fun to just write a song because I've been doing a lot of work with going back over songs that already exist and fleshing them out and improving them, but I haven't written a song really since RPM. So it's been fun to start with a fresh idea and flesh it out. My challenge, so I had a little bit of I guess what could be considered a stoic challenge this week. There's this idea in Stoicism called amor fati, the love of fate. So it's the idea to not just accept everything that comes your way, but to love it, to appreciate it. And I had a bunch of that this week as I had a bunch of unexpected maintenance stuff that needed to happen in the apartment. So Monday evening, the sink in the bathroom got clogged, and I ended up having to have somebody come over and fix it. So, whenever somebody's here, it's obviously pretty disruptive. Like, I can't be doing
Yeah.
the stuff I usually do. I think actually when the guy showed up, I was like just on my way to go get ready for a workout. So I ended up having to skip my workout that day. And so that's the kind of thing that normally would have really, really annoyed me, really kind of like ruined my day or ruined my week because somebody messed with my routine. I'm like, how dare you? Don't you know who I am? Don't you know what this means to me? So yeah, to just be like, okay, I guess I gotta go for a walk or something tonight instead. And then he showed up again. So he fixed it. He fixed the clog and said, it might end up leaking, just let us know. It did leak. So he ended up having to come back and like replace the whole pipe under the sink. And also on Friday, the water to the building got shut down so that they could do like plumbing repairs. Right. And so it was like 6 hours without water. So it was like all this stuff that was really disruptive to like my nice, comfortable schedule and routine. But I just made adjustments. I just rolled with it, which is something I, at another point in my life, I would have been very resentful. But I was just appreciative that all this stuff got taken care of and now it's done. And, now I can go back to life as usual. And, I took that time while the maintenance guy was here to just do some reading because I kind of had to be on alert because he needed my help every once in a while to just like move stuff out of the way or whatever. And just to keep the cat from getting into trouble because she actually is scared of this maintenance guy. It's like the same maintenance guy who comes anytime there's an issue and she hides out under the couch, but he often has to leave to go get something and then come back. And like once he leaves, she goes into the bathroom to like see what's happening and I don't want her getting hurt. I don't want like a tool falling on her head. Yeah. So I had to be like on alert. So I just kind of like did a bunch of reading. So yeah, it was, pretty mild challenge, but at the same time, it's something that for me and my sort of shelteredness, it would have really bothered me at another point, but it was nice to just kind of roll with it and to kind of, I had this conversation with Stoic friends last week about amor fati. And so it was sort of top of mind. Yeah, and that was good. And then the fun/interesting thing, I went with my best friend Josh to see the movie A Quiet Place Day One.
Oh yeah.
It was really fun because I haven't been to a movie in a theater in years. And I had some gift cards I got from a student years ago for Cineplex. Yeah. And I'm like, I really want to go see a movie. I really want to go hang out with Josh. I'm like, let's see if we can go see something. And so that movie was his suggestion. And spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen it yet. This is like very, very mild spoiler, but just in case somebody who hasn't watched it yet, like wants no spoilers, this is your warning. So it wasn't, and actually that includes you. I should ask you, like, are you planning on seeing it? Is it going to bother you?
No, I'll see it, but I don't mind having, it's not something where I'm like, I'm not anticipating it so much. I'm like, I don't want any spoilers. Like, I don't really care. I'm interested to see it, but it's like, I probably will forget, honestly, by the time I actually watch it. So.
Okay. So I will say I did not find it scary at all, but it was incredibly stressful because right at the start of the movie, the main character has a cat with her. Has like a service cat. So
no, I hate that already.
That was my thought. That was my thought. So at first I'm like, oh, because it's a really cute black and white cat. So the main character has cancer and she's in hospice, and so she has this emotional support cat, Frodo, and she has him like with a harness on a leash, and it's just so cute. It's just this. He looks like a little marshmallow. Like he's got such a fat fuzzy face. And I'm like, oh, a cat. I'm like, oh, no, a cat. Like this. Because whenever there's an animal in a horror movie.
I hate that. That should not be legal. Like, okay. There should be no risk to, like, as soon as I see an animal in a movie and it's like, it's like high stakes kind of situation. It's like, my anxiety goes way up. Because I'm like, if something happens to this animal, it's going to destroy me.
Yeah. Exactly. And now I'm like, I think I'm becoming a cat person because I have a cat. It's always like, obviously, like anytime I see an animal, like I love animals, but you know, for me, it was always that special connection with dogs because I had dogs all my life. But now that I just have the cat, I look at cats differently. All I can see is like my cat's face on that cat's face.
Yeah.
I'm like, which it's actually, I laugh because this cat was like, because obviously like the premise of the Quiet Place is that they have to remain quiet. Otherwise they get attacked. And this cat was so quiet. And I'm like, if that were me and my cat out in like a Quiet Place situation, I would be dead instantly because she meows constantly. She's one of the most talkative cats I've ever met. So I just kept having this image of me like hiding with her and she's like, meow, and then they all flood me. So, but yeah, so I will give you this spoiler. Again, lots of spoilers, people. I'll put something in I'll put a timestamp to indicate when the spoilers are done. But I will give you the spoiler that the cat does not die.
Okay, good.
The cat, in my mind, is basically the star of the movie. So, but it was so stressful. It was so stressful because, of course, like stuff happens and the cat gets away, and you're like, "Oh, that's it. The cat's gone forever."
Yeah.
But then she keeps reuniting with the cat, and every time I'm just,
that is so playing with that's playing with our heartstrings. Yeah.
I was like, I was so emotional because I felt the relief of, you know, oh man.
Well, because anyways, this is a full other podcast episode. Because animals don't know. Anyway, yeah. I can't deal with it. Or animals getting sick in movies, like Marley and Me. I cannot.
I refuse to watch that movie.
Yeah, it's traumatizing. I watched that before even having a dog. I don't think I'd be able to get through it now. Yeah. How did you find? So it's funny that you bring up going to the movies for the first time in a long time because Mike and I went to see. Is it called Horizon or New Horizon? It's the Kevin Costner like Western movie.
No, I'm not sure.
Which is not getting good reviews, but we both loved it. But I think a lot of people are like, it was too slow, blah, 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 blah. But anyways, we both really, really enjoyed it. But yeah, it was our first time being in a movie theater since like 2019. And which wasn't like, it's not that long ago, but still, it's like, it was not comfortable. Like the seats were comfortable, but I was like, I like being able to pause and go to the bathroom or move around or whatever. And then there's like people beside you. And I'm like, this doesn't feel normal to me anymore. Right. It's been so long because we used to go fairly regularly and now it's like not very often, but obviously. Yeah. So how did you find actually like the theater going experience?
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. All right. So I just feel like a big curmudgeon.
No, I mean, I get where you're coming from. Like, definitely. I think, how long was the movie that you guys saw?
Well, it was quite long. It was 3 hours.
Oh, yeah, because this was only like an hour and 40 minutes. So it was like started and then finished before I knew it. So yeah, and we were in a pretty small theater. We went at 7:10, or the movie started at 7:10 on Friday, and it was not very busy. Like, it was in one of the smaller theaters. Not a lot of people there. Everybody's really quiet too. Like, that's obviously with a movie like this where it's mostly like the physical acting, you know, it could have really been ruined, but everybody was there. There's like one guy in the same aisle we were in who kept dropping his phone. There should have been a monster that came out. Like, there should have been like a staff and like a cost. That would have been amazing. That's a missed opportunity where anyone makes noise and this like staff member with a costume comes out and just screams or something. That I feel like that's the kind of thing they might do in like the LA premiere.
Yeah,
they would do something like that. I think
really immersive.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, if you make a noise, you'll die. Kind of like immersive experience.
Oh man, yeah. That, as if I wasn't stressed out enough. I think the thought that somebody could actually come out and attack would just. I think I would die. But yeah, no, like I definitely was impressed with the seats. They've improved the quality vastly compared to those like fabric contraptions that they.
Is that like the last time you went to a movie you were in like the standard old school? Yeah.
So it was nice, and maybe because I wasn't actually sitting right next to somebody because there was so much space, like maybe that just made the experience better. Like, we got a really good seats because now they do like assigned seating.
I love that.
Yeah, so I don't know. It was such a small theater. I think every seat's probably really good, but it was just, it was a really good experience.
kids these days aren't going to know the experience of like I remember going and lining up to see movies, and you
Yeah.
needed to go early. Like I remember seeing the Harry Potter movies and like having to go early to make sure you get good seats.
Yeah.
It's so nice to be able to book a seat and then you don't have to like get into the theater until the movie starts. It's awesome.
Yeah, because like I got there because I walked there.
Oh, nice.
And it was like the estimated time on Google Maps was like 45 minutes. Like I made it there in like 35. So I'm like, that's not bad at all. And it's really straight ahead walk. So I got there and then I went and I sat and they have like their little front area with like the tables and stuff and the concession and then the little arcade. It's a very small one. We went to the South Keys Cineplex.
Yeah.
It's pretty small. So like the ones I used to go to, they felt bigger. I don't know if this one has always been that small, if they've just downsized them because maybe people are not going to movies as often. But it was like a nice, didn't feel overwhelming, so I got there at probably, 6:45 and just waited a little bit. And then Josh met up with me and then we, he got some popcorn and we went in and yeah, I really enjoyed the experience. So maybe it would be different if, we were talking about starting to go more regularly. If we, are going more often, it might be that some times are better than others.
Yeah.
If it's too crowded, definitely I don't like being that closed in. But I also I've been going to concerts where I'm having to sit next to people and stuff like that. So I think that experience is not totally foreign to me. And actually, I like the process of the movie better because when you're going to a concert, you tend to have like these big gaps between like your opening act and then your headliners. So that like the waiting is like the worst part for me. I'm like, just start. So we didn't have long to wait, and then the movie started, and then it was done. Then we could leave, and then we hung out for a bit. So yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, I think for me, like it's just having to sit still in one place in one position for an extended period of time. Like I think I'm not as good at that as I used to be. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did. It was a 3-hour movie, so that.
Oh yeah,
that.
I feel like in that case,
things.
It would help to have some kind of an intermission, just so people can stretch their legs.
Yeah, that would be nice. But I could also see how some people would hate that. Like, I like that idea, and also don't like that idea at the same time.
Yeah, it's almost like you want to have a separate theater, like the version with an intermission, and then the one without, for people who want to be fully immersed from start to end.
Anyway, so that was an interesting, fun thing. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. All right, so main topic, regrets.
I kind of want to keep talking about movies, actually.
we can always do an episode on
Should
movies.
we
I'm not a huge
transition
movie buff
to a
to a movie podcast.
Yeah.
I would be terrible at that. It would have to be like, because if you watch movies regularly, I don't. We could do like a musical splaining thing where I don't really watch movies and you watch movies and then we'll have to like watch one together and review it. Or something. I feel like I would be able to offer no insight. I have little to no understanding of the world of cinema besides, just that sometimes I like movies and sometimes I don't.
What more do you need to understand?
I feel like it would help to have some degree of understanding of how the sausage is made, so to speak. For now, no movie podcast. Stay tuned. Maybe we'll expand. We can do a movie podcast someday. But today we are talking about regret and shoulds. Did you feel like kicking it off, or?
I was the one who suggested this theme for this episode, and I don't actually know why. I'm trying to remember if there's something that prompted me saying that we should visit this subject. I think because at the moment I'm like, there's some things it just popped into my head. Like there's some things that I was like, oh, I regret not starting that earlier, or like not sticking with that or whatever. Yeah, and I guess it just kind of got me thinking about like the function of regret, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to say to start it off. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on regrets?
Yeah, someone whose life is plagued by them.
I think
experience.
I think everyone's
true of everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's I think the thing that interests me is just like we all have regrets, but what's interesting is like so in my case there's a lot of like regrets around not taking opportunities. So like I remember one of the summer jobs I had in university, I had the option of taking on a management position, and I didn't do that. I said no to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I regret that decision because it's like, I mean, it wouldn't have like changed things much, but it would have been an opportunity to kind of like take on a leadership role. And it's like,
Yeah.
why did I make that decision? But it's funny how, and there's another thing that in university that like, again, an opportunity that came up that I said no to. And like, it's me saying no out of fear.
Yeah.
And those are sort of the situations that I regret, but it doesn't stop me from changing, like I keep making the same mistake over and over and over again. And that's kind of like, is that the same with you? Like, do you find that you kind of, the specific situations that cause you regret are like you making the same choice? Like, is that?
Yeah. Like, especially if it feels like I'm self-sabotaging, especially
Yeah.
when it's out of fear. Yeah. To see these patterns. And it's difficult because, in the moment you are just trying to make the best choice at the time. But when you can look back, you'll see this trend of all these opportunities I had that could have made things different for me or better for me, and I just didn't take them. And then especially it's distressing when you reflect on the reason why, being fear, being, I didn't think I could do it, I didn't think I was ready. Because that's the thing, is when you get to this point in the present, your perspective is different. You sort of see what you've been able to accomplish in other areas, and you think, I could have done that. There's no reason why I couldn't have just done it. But it's, for me, I'm having to do a lot of work with letting go of the disappointment of not having done things that I feel like would have put me in a better position. Because for one thing, you never know if something actually would have yielded better results than the choice you made. It's this idea that we think, once we make a choice, it's like it could be the thing that would unlock everything for us. But life is just a series of choices, and some you never get to see what the outcome is until you have that outcome. So you're always just gonna have to make peace with being given choices that mean you don't know the alternate path. You don't know what that would have looked like. You just kind of have to like make a decision and move forward with it. Because if you spend your life dwelling on how much better your life could have been, I mean, you're wasting time, and you're wasting time in a life that doesn't exist. Like, that life ceased to exist when you made a different choice. And that's fine, because definitely you can, from this moment, make a different choice. So if you can instead use regret as a signal that maybe you violated something that you realize is now like a value, you can make a different choice. So for us, if we're thinking, I don't want to make choices based out of fear anymore. Like I regret being afraid to do the thing I could have done. You can now make a different choice. So if you're facing another situation where you have to make a decision and you feel that fear coming up, so you have an opportunity, you feel that fear, if you can think back to all that regret and use it to go, well, I'm going to make a different choice now. I'm going to do the thing that scares me.
Yeah.
That could then put you on a different path forward.
Yeah. And the tricky thing, though, is like, and circling back to self-sabotage, because when I think back on those specific things that I kind of look back and be like, I wish I had done it, I made a different choice. At the time, I wasn't thinking like, I'm not going to do this thing because of fear. Mm-hmm. I told myself a different story completely, right? Which is self-sabotaging, right? You tell yourself a different story, and you look back and in retrospect, it's like you realize, I actually made that choice. I told myself that story, but the reason I made that choice was because I was scared. Mm-hmm. But what's alarming is like, how would I know, like, if I had a choice to make tomorrow? It's like, how do I know that the story I'm telling myself is true and not self-sabotaging? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, how can you identify those moments where you sort of have to push yourself? And like, that's the tricky part, is our brains are really good at making things up and convincing ourselves of certain things. And I think that's the challenging thing with regret, is that you don't realize until too late that you kind of like succumbed to that pattern, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess is, yeah.
So I wonder then if you become aware of this pattern in retrospect, is there a way to set up like a process that you can go through now and going forward whenever you have a choice to make sure that you're not making a choice out of fear that is being rewritten in your mind as something else.
Yeah.
Like maybe it comes down to like writing out a simple list, like a pro and con list, maybe even just like getting things out of your head to really wrestle with it and really sit with how you feel.
Well, so, and I kind of wonder, there's that saying, like, you want to die with no regrets. But I
Mm-hmm.
actually wonder, I don't think that's possible, first of all.
Yeah.
And is regret that bad? Like, it's something that we try to fight against and we want to avoid having. But is it worth trying to avoid? Is it worth trying to fight if it's kind of an inevitability, anyways?
Yeah, I think the idea that it's inevitable is really helpful because then you can reframe it as something that is maybe something to learn from. Because if
I
you if
think
there's
so.
something, yeah, because if there's something you're like, I really wish I had done this, do it now. Just do it now. Do it differently.
Yeah. And because I think what, you're right. Like there could be processes in place that the next time maybe a career advancement choice comes up, I know I can reflect on that decision I made and think back to like how I was like, oh, I kind of was kicking myself after making that decision and not taking that opportunity. I can use that and I can kind of like go through that process of like right now, I've been here before and I made a choice because out of fear, am I doing that again here?
Mm-hmm.
But that's only one specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing I can do that can prevent me from, like, I can't safeguard myself from the potential of regret in every single scenario because I
Mm-hmm.
haven't, you can only do it when you have had the experience of regretting a specific scenario. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I might come to a crossroads in an area that I've never come to a crossroads before. And I might make that choice out of fear, not realizing it until after the fact. And I'll regret it.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's nothing I could have done to prevent because it was the first time I was in that scenario. But I might be in that scenario again in another 5, 10 years, and I'll know because I'll learn from that. I've learned from that experience. So maybe regret is actually something that like is a good. We kind of look at it as it gets a bad reputation, right? Because there's all sorts
Hmm.
of sayings about, yeah, don't you don't want to die with regret. You don't want to like all these sort of like horrible things, and it's like it actually does have a function and it's not something we can avoid. Like we can't safeguard ourselves from negative feelings, and regret is ultimately a really negative feeling. So I don't know if it's something necessarily to fear, but I think like what you're kind of getting at, it's a tool to help you make a different choice in the future. But there will be situations that we come up against that we self-sabotage, we make a choice that maybe is not in our best interest, and that'll be painful to reflect on, but then we use that as a learning opportunity.
Of course. Yeah. It reminds me of just what you were saying. Reminds me of this quote. I'm gonna paraphrase it from this business coach named James Wedmore, and he says something like, whenever you try something, you either get the outcome you want or you get the lesson you needed.
Yes,
And I think
yeah,
it's that idea where if you don't let anything feel like a waste, you can use it. But if you
right,
spend your life, I think where regret becomes an issue is when you spend your life dwelling on all the things that you could have done or could have been. The fact is you're not. It's this idea, I think it might be from Seneca, that, the past belongs to death. I think anytime you spend living in that past is time you're not really spending living, being here, where you could
yeah,
make choices that will get you somewhere different. But it's kind of like the idea of failure, right? Like if you're trying to constantly avoid regret, you really miss out on life. Like how many people are paralyzed and don't make decisions because they're afraid they're going to make one that they regret. It's the
right.
same with failure. Like I'm afraid I'm going to do this and I'm going to fail. But it's like no, that's not something to be afraid of. It's just a sign that you've done something. You've made a choice. You've put yourself out there. You've done something, challenging or whatever, and now you have feedback. And then you take that feedback and then you turn it into something that will help you make a better choice in the future. It's all part of the process.
Yeah, so in similar to failure, it can be a jumping off point,
Yeah.
or it can be something that pulls you down and stops you from moving forward. Like the note I have here is, which is on the other side of it, is like the function of regret is to discourage you from starting. And
Mm-hmm.
that could be the function of regret, right? Like in some case, I think about that a lot with music. Like if I'd stuck with piano from when I was like, I did piano lessons when I was grade 6. I think I started for a couple, and I did that for like 3 years or whatever. And it's like if I had stuck with it, I'd be hopefully pretty proficient by this point. Um, but I didn't. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and there's that regret of not starting sooner. But that
Yeah.
regret of not starting sooner actually acts to discourage me from starting today, right?
Yeah.
So there's a way in which regret can functions to stop you from starting almost.
Mm-hmm.
But you can turn that around and you can look at it from like, like, yeah, okay, I regret that I didn't stick with it, but I can start now, and then 5 years from
Mm-hmm.
now I'll be, so you can use it as a productive thing, or as a, what's the
Mm.
opposite of productive? Just
Unproductive.
unproductive.
Destructive.
Destructive, I think, is a better,
Yeah, I
yeah,
like that. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Perspective really is such an important thing here, to be able to use that to make a choice now, because again, the only time you have is now. The past is done, the future is not guaranteed. The only thing that you have that is a guarantee is that you are here, like right now, and right now. So what are you doing with that? Maybe some things to think about to help for anybody who is listening who does feel a lot of regret, to the point of paralysis, or to the point of sort of being mired in this constant discontent with their lives. There's this great book called The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. And there's this quote from one of the characters that essentially boils down to like, regret is BS. Like, it's just nonsense. Like, and the whole book is like, it's about regret. It's about the main character, like, exploring all the possible lives she could have had, and, being able to gain perspective from seeing things, in a different light. So I highly recommend that book for anybody for anybody who likes to read, but anybody especially who is feeling a lot of regret. And there's this idea too about wasted time. So it's like, I think a lot of where I have felt regret about my past is like where I feel like I've wasted time. But
Oh,
ultimately it
interesting.
wasn't wasted. Yeah. And I mean, this is something I'm sort of coming to now, where I'm feeling like actually all the time I spent really struggling with things and really not doing the things that I would be doing now, it's how I found my way here. And it's through all of those challenges and all of those struggles that I now feel like I have something to actually offer the world, because I can help keep people from struggling the way I did. So
Yeah.
to say that all of that was wasted time would be such a mistake. And there's this video from Jessica McCabe. She has a YouTube channel called How to ADHD, and she has this video I'll link to in the show notes, where she talks about like not believing in the idea of wasted time, and I'm like, that was really powerful for me. I think about that a lot, because that is something I've wrestled with. And I just recently found all of my music journals, all of my practice journals, because I'm putting it together because I want to do a video about them eventually, about like my journaling process and how it's evolved and all of that. And it's crazy to see I have these 4 notebooks just full of all the stuff that I've been doing. So in some ways I feel very, very stunted in certainly my career, but my musical journey, like there was so much that happened over that space of time. So to regret that is just doing myself a disservice for all the work that I did, and there's this idea. So I pull up this book. This is one of my all-time favorite books. It's called Courage is Calling by Ryan Holiday. In one of the early chapters, he talks about Florence Nightingale. And the idea is that, if I remember correctly, it's that she felt this calling to go into nursing and to help people from the time she was like 16. And she didn't actually take action on that, I think, until she was in her maybe early to mid 30s. And that, when I was reading this chapter, I mean, this really resonated with me, because I often talk about music being my calling. I felt this calling since I was 15, and, to be in my mid 30s and feel like I haven't really done what I've came here to do is something that has really weighed on me. But Ryan Holiday writes this paragraph in here that really resonated and really I felt took a lot of comfort from. And it goes like this. One way to see Nightingale's story is that she spent years ignoring her call to service. The other is that she was preparing herself for the mission of her life. It took time for her to see through the smoke and noise of the family and society that attempted to discourage her from doing what needed to be done. It took time for her to acquire the skills she needed to transform nursing. So that really, I mean, it's something I think about. I read this in the fall of last year. I still think about this all the time because I think I take such great comfort in the idea that I wasn't ignoring my call. I was just getting the skills I needed to do the thing I really needed to do. But this is where shoulds kind of come into play because shoulds and regrets are so deeply linked because so many of our regrets are about the things we should have done or we shouldn't have done. And this is sort of, a lot of this ties into like societal expectations of when things should happen. So this idea that I should have my career figured out by a certain time, I should be at this place by a certain age or whatever. All that does is create these expectations. And as we've talked about before, there's this idea that, happiness is expectations minus reality. So if you're constantly, throwing these expectations at yourself about what you should be doing, you're not going to be very happy. You are going to feel a lot of regret about, the choices you made because they didn't get you to this place you think you should be, or you didn't do the things you thought you should be doing. So, this also ties into the idea of developing range. So there's this great book called Range by David Epstein, and he talks about, these people who created these really interesting lives and careers by being generalists, by going a little bit wider before they specialize. So at some point you do want to specialize, obviously, because if you're trying to do too much, you spread yourself too thin. But it's the idea of accumulating experience in maybe different areas and then combining them into something that's unique, I think is really important too. So, if for anybody who maybe made a different choice, so music is a good example. So maybe somebody who was doing music and didn't stick with it, and now they feel regret about not doing that. Think about what else you did during that time. Maybe they did something that involved video, or that involved, coding, or writing, or whatever. You can find a way to you can get started now, developing as a musician, and then you have the benefit of all of your unique experience that is going to inform your music and inform what you do with your music, if anything. Obviously, you don't have to do music to do something with it. If it's just for yourself, like, that's beautiful too. But for anybody who wants to do something, how are those skills that you acquired along the way going to help give you something that's uniquely your own?
Yeah, there's a few things that are kind of coming to mind here. I think, one thing to kind of acknowledge is our own perspective on life plays a part in how you frame regret and how you frame choices and all that stuff. And for me, I've always kind of had I have this sort of life philosophy that I am where I need to be. I always am where I should. I don't like using the word should, but this. I don't know if I believe in a greater being or whatever, but I do believe that there is a path for me and I am on it. And so that means that everything that I'm experiencing, people that I'm meeting, things that I'm doing, it's all happening for a reason, but I don't know what that reason is yet. But you see that, right? Like, I see, like, I'm here now, and I can see these, like, certain points in my life where I'm like, if I hadn't been at that place, I wouldn't have been there to meet that person, which got me involved in this, which got me. Yeah. And you start to, and I think that helps, like, starting to kind of look at your life and seeing those kind of, like, coincidences or whatever. When you start to look at those, I think that helps you kind of tackle that regret or the because there's, there's lots of things that, like, there's lots of things I could regret deeply. I could regret my whole undergrad because it really didn't get me, in terms of employment, it didn't get me very far. But I can't, because I can see how that played a role in where I am today, right? And so I think it's kind of fun to look at your life, like, look at the good things in your life.
Yeah.
And then look at how you got there and what things need to be in play and what experiences you need to have, like good and bad, to have achieved this thing that is positive in your life right now. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's an important thing to do, to remind yourself that like good things happen, bad things happen, but they can lead somewhere good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think like the other thing that kind of came to mind too is just like, and I don't know what specifically my mom said, but what my takeaway was, at any given moment you have a choice to make, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there is no right or wrong choice. You can make any choice, but once you make a decision, you have to make that decision right for you. And I always thought that was an interesting, and I think about that a lot, right? Where it's like there's again, you're at a crossroads. Maybe society by society's standards, you should be doing this, but you want to do this or whatever. Or maybe you make the choice and it's like afterwards, like, like I really wish I hadn't made that choice. Well, it's now you made the choice. So now it's your responsibility to make that choice right for you.
Mm-hmm.
Which means now you're in the situation that you're in because of the choice you made, and now you've got to figure out your way through it. Like you have a responsibility to try to move through this in a positive way because you made that
Mm-hmm.
choice. That was your choice to make. And I think that's kind of an interesting and empowering sort of concept, right? Like you don't have to be a victim of your choices, essentially. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes we can kind of be, and I've been guilty of this. Sometimes I kind of play the victim of my own choice, and it's like, well, I made that
Mm-hmm.
choice, so
Yeah. Yeah, that is a bit of, it feels very amor fati to me, to, so not necessarily in the perspective of like the love of fate, but the love of your choices. And
yeah,
you go, this is the one I made and I'm gonna make it work. Yeah,
yeah,
it's definitely it's much more empowering than feeling like a
I
victim of
screwed
your own
up.
choices. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And putting like that blame on yourself too is never gonna help you.
No, because and I think that's a really really good point because I think a lot of the times I think when we make a choice that in retrospect we realize wasn't the best for us, I think we do blame ourselves. And fair enough because we're kind of conditioned to blame ourselves, right? And you might be making a choice that your family doesn't agree with too, and they
Mm-hmm.
there's some blame coming from external forces, which reinforces this kind of self blame. And I think it really is important, and this kind of ties into self compassion. Like
Absolutely.
we make the choices we do with the experience and the tools that we have in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
and we make the choices out of where we are emotionally in the moment too.
Mm-hmm.
And it in time, especially if you're in crisis or whatever, it can be
Yeah.
extremely challenging to have a clear head about the choices. And I think it's really important that we show ourselves some compassion
Mm-hmm.
if we do make a choice that it's like, oh, that was not smart. Like I'm thinking, yeah, we need to show ourselves some compassion and then like take care of ourselves after the fact.
Yeah, yeah, it's almost like going back in time to take care of that past self who wasn't in the position you are now to make a better choice. Like
Yeah.
to recognize that you were doing your best. I think that's been really helpful for me to recognize like how many decisions I made because I was not doing well emotionally.
Yeah.
And you go, that really screwed things up for me down the road, but like I get it. And so you can definitely stop pointing the finger at your past self.
Yeah.
That makes it so much easier to see the lesson in all of that. Because if you're just constantly feeling this self hatred because of the choices you've made, even if it's just directed to your past self, like you can't turn that into anything. You're only going to see the bad. You're not going to see, well, you know, I'm doing better now. Like even that is, I think, a really helpful realization to be able to go, I made this choice because I was in a really bad place, but now I'm doing so much better. I wouldn't make a choice like that now. Like that's
Yeah.
a huge victory to just acknowledge where you've come and to ask, how can I be even better? How can I feel even better? What can I do to support myself to make better decisions? And that's where, a book like Clear Thinking by Shane Parrish would be really helpful, where he really gives you this whole process you can follow to like make the best decisions you can.
It's a very like multi-layered thing, eh? Like I'm just thinking
Mm-hmm.
like on one hand I want to say that like don't live regretting little choices, blah blah blah. Like, and it's true. I think like don't regret the job you didn't take, or the fact that you didn't, in my case, didn't stick with piano. Because those are things you have the opportunity to make a different choice when that situation comes up again, or to start playing piano or whatever.
Yeah.
But then there's the regrets where I'm like, they're bigger. Like I'm thinking, like if you're in a really toxic relationship or something,
Mm-hmm.
that's where regret. And I'm doing this right now where I'm thinking forward, and I'm thinking, in 15 years, what will I regret? What will I regret not doing, or whatever? And those bigger ones, those are the ones I think we really need to pay attention to. And I think, like regret can have a function in getting us out of a bad situation. Or I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I just like, there's some things I think that are easier to dismiss and probably better just to dismiss. And then there's others where it's like, it's important to pay attention to this.
Yeah, I think you're really hitting on something. As you're talking, I'm getting a lot of ideas. And I think to bring it back to the idea of like trying to avoid regret, I think if instead you can think about how do I build a life that I enjoy? How do I build a life that I love? Because a lot of that stuff is going to be answered in like the big things. So rather than going, what am I going to regret? You can ask, what do I want my life to look like? And like every part of your life too, because I think one area people tend to focus on is career. They have this idea that
that's where
the career is going to be the thing. Like once I can figure that out, everything else is going to take care of itself. But it's like, actually, life is incredibly multifaceted. There's all these things that are really valuable to us. And yeah, career is one of those things. It's where we spend a lot of our time. It's what we use to have an impact in the world often. But it's just one piece of life. So, to use something like Cal Newport's lifestyle-centric career planning could be really helpful, where you're not just like, oh, I got to get the best job with the most money with all this, and like, I got to pick the right one. If you better define what it is you want overall, like I want to live in this kind of place. I want to be able to hang out with these kinds of people. I want to do these kinds of things, like be a part of this kind of community. I want this kind of partnership. I want like if you can think about that, and like the kind of work, like I want work that lets me have autonomy or lets me be creative, or then you have so many more options rather than feeling like you have to find like the perfect career, the perfect job. And like, I think that can also help to dissipate some of that feeling of regret. Like I should have picked this one because this is obviously the wrong choice. Rather than just recognizing that there are a lot of different options, you can pivot at any point too. But it makes it easier to do that if you're not depending on just one area of your life being like perfect to do that. If your things are not going well with your career, but they're going well in other areas because you've cultivated this really rich life, I think it just makes it easier to feel like your life is worthwhile regardless of what's going on in your career or in some other area.
Only if you put an equal amount of weight on career as you do in the other areas. This is where I struggle because I put so much weight on the career part of things. So when it's not going well, things feel really awful. And it's funny because it's like I have a lot of, like in terms of relationships, strong relationships, a lot going on there. And like I have like hobbies and all that, right? But it's because I put so much weight on career, it becomes very challenging to, the other things for whatever reason don't feed me as well as like or don't, it's out of whack for sure. And I think that's probably a pretty common problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think for like people our age, so millennials, I think it's because we were fed this idea of like finding your passion, finding your dream. And it's again so much more nuanced than that, so much more complex than that. It's like your life is like an ecosystem. There's all these different moving pieces. And yes, you don't want to neglect your career, because where you work, again, you spend a lot of time there, a lot of energy. That's where you're going to be funneling all of this work into your craft. Like you want to pick something that matters to you, but it's something that often develops over time. And like if you really want to do meaningful work, it takes a long time to get there often, to like build the skills you need so that you can be a person who can really have an impact and really do meaningful work. It's Cal Newport's idea of career capital. So he writes about this in his book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, where when so a really good job is a rare thing to have. It's rare and valuable. So in exchange, you have to have rare and valuable skills to offer. And that takes time to develop. So if you're fleshing things out and you're finding all this meaning in other areas, it makes it so much easier to play the long game career-wise. This is where you get people in David Epstein's book who have like these second and maybe even third careers. I haven't read it in a while, but where they accumulated all this skill and then they were able to put that and really use that to build something they were really satisfied with.
Yeah. I know. I think the other challenge though too is, and I don't know if this is just our generation or what, but I feel like my value comes from the work I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's been how I've been conditioned through the education system, but my value as a human doesn't matter how good my relationships are or what my hobbies are. My value comes from the work I do and how I contribute to to society. And I think that's also where you see, I think that might kind of account for why I don't think I'm alone on that. And I think that might account for why career is such an important thing to so many people.
I was like that for many, many years, so I definitely relate.
Yeah, and it's really too bad because I think it means that there's a lot of people who are navigating the world feeling not good enough because we have been conditioned to only value this very small thing. And how great for a capitalist society to have conditioned people to only value themselves based on how they can contribute to the economy. Not to get radical here, but
we are planning to dismantle the whole system. Just FYI, be prepared. That is happening.
Yeah, so it's, and I mean, I think I wonder too, like, is that why so many people take and me included, I'm guilty of this. I have this hobby of art and I'm trying to make it into a side hustle, right? Like you see, that has been so prevalent recently in the past, like 10 years, like the side hustles, the grind and like, and I think, and it's like, what is that? Like, why? And again, I think it's just like our value is tied up to what we do for work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's this idea that if you can't either get money or attention from something, it's not worth doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it's worth doing, but like
it's not worth
serious.
Doing on the it's frivolous.
Yeah.
Like spending time with your friends or your kids or your dog at the park, like that. Shouldn't you be doing something productive?
It's the productivity thing. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I would actually love to do an episode on productivity because my philosophy about productivity is very different. Actually, one of the things we talked about doing was like a book club on slow productivity. I'd love to talk about that at some point soon because I'm very much on board with Cal's notion of productivity because it's recognizing that we are wired to create meaningful things. Like we like to take our ideas and make them manifest in the world. That's to roughly paraphrase Matthew Crawford's book, Shop Class's Soulcraft. It's this idea that we like to have ideas and then bring these things into fruition. So like I love having a seed of a musical idea and then turning that into a song. It's like this didn't exist before, now it exists. That's very fulfilling to me. And so I want to be productive in that sense, and that I feel like I have motion forward, like I'm creating something that's meaningful to me, that's helpful, that helps the people I want to reach, but not just for the sake of it. Like, because I got tied up in that for a lot of years where my sense of self-worth was tied to how much work I was doing. It was like this armor I built around myself to be like, well, see, I'm worth something. Look how much I work. Even though it wasn't necessarily that I was getting money out of that time, a lot of it was just practicing. Some of it was I was teaching a lot too, and it's exhausting when you don't recognize your inherent value. You end up on this hamster wheel where you're just constantly running and running and running, and you just feel like you can never get off because the moment you step off, there goes your worth, there goes your value. But it's just not like that. It should be that you're building a life from the recognition that you are somebody who has value and that you deserve a life that you enjoy, that makes you happy, that fills you up in ways that are meaningful to you and not just to our capitalist society.
Well, and circling back to regret, like I was talking about how there's like, there's some regrets that seem easier to dismiss, and then there's some regrets that you should pay more attention to. And like, so as I'm going through this process of like, in 15 years, what am I going to regret? The thing that comes to mind is I'm going to regret how seriously I take work.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I will, because there's been situations in the past. Like I've always taken work so seriously. It doesn't matter what the job is. And I regret that. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and then this is where it's like, this is where regret has a function, and it's like a warning flag, and you need to pay attention. I was talking to someone else the other day he's feeling the same sort of thing, just this like, not necessarily regret, but this just tired of taking things so seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And to what end? Like
yeah,
like where are we getting ourselves?
Yeah, I think life can be a lot more fun if we unlearn a lot of what we've been taught. I think,
yeah,
and not necessarily, because I think again we have this idea of fun that it's frivolous, but it's important for us to enjoy our lives and to be joyful, and you can find joy in your work if it's balanced. Like it's so great when you're well rested and you sit down to do something you're really excited to work on. It's amazing. Like I love that. But if you're constantly grinding, you just never get a chance to enjoy what you're doing. So yeah, it's like trying to like take ourselves and our lives seriously enough that we can stop and say, I'm going to make the choices that work for me, and I'm going to build the life that I want, regardless of other people's expectations, but not so seriously that we're just constantly bogged down with this cloud of doom, because everything feels so important and so heavy.
Yeah. And there's also like, I also don't think that you can't live a life where everything is fun. Like it's just not possible, right? Like, and
of course,
work,
yeah.
You can't find that. I don't think that job exists where every day is fun, like, or enjoyable.
There's always going to be
like,
stuff you don't want to do. Yeah.
Yeah. There's always going to be frustrations. But if you take things less seriously, those frustrations, those pain points within your job, within your work, become less draining because you're not taking it all as seriously. And that's where I would ultimately like to get to, where it's like, this does not inform my value as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Take it less seriously, and then when things go wrong, whatever, not a big deal, because it doesn't inform the value. It doesn't inform my value as a human. So it doesn't, like, what does it matter if things go off the rails?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything.
One note I've made is to not confuse fun with easy. I think that's something I've thought of in the past, because dealing with people who are learning music, they're like, oh, this is supposed to be fun. Like, this is fun. It's fun to be challenged. It's not easy. It's hard. And a lot of things are hard, but it can still be fun overall. Yeah, that was just a thought I've had before about that, this idea that people always equate fun with easy. And it's like, you know how much fun I have trying to work through a really tough thing on the guitar? Like, I love that. I think you got to find your tough things, and then like learn how to deal with the challenges that are inevitable. Like those are tough to deal with, but definitely like what you were saying, like just not taking yourself so seriously means you're not going to dwell on the thing that went wrong. You just be like, we're going to figure it out and we're going to move on and then keep going.
Yeah. I mean, that's when you know you've landed on your thing, right? When you're doing it and it's hard, but you still find it fun. I think that's how you know. But the other way of framing it too is like rewarding, is because not everyone's going to be like, oh, this is hard and fun, like as they're learning guitar, right? It depends on if it's your thing or not. But it can be hard and rewarding.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then because I think for me, like learning how to play guitar will never be a fun thing. I don't think, but once I get to the point where I can play, that'll be fun. But the learning part will never be fun, but it could be rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
But for you, it's fun because music is your thing, right? Like that's.
Yeah. This is where I have to be very careful not to project. Like, this is fun. It's like somebody's crying. It's like, it's like reward. We love this.
It's fun or reward. We love this. But I mean, I get that, because it's the same. There's things with me with art too, that it's like, for me, it's fun and challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And for someone else, although not really, I I think I've talked about this before, where it's not really fun. I think for me still, it's like, it's rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's fun though is like, and a good example for me is like figuring out Notion was extremely challenging, but so much fun. Like that is, but for someone else, it might be challenging and rewarding, or just challenging and frustrating, and they give up on the platform.
Yeah, I think it seems like there's definitely a niche of people. I mean, it's a pretty big niche, honestly, of people who just love Notion. It lights up something in some people, because I totally relate. I think Notion is a lot of fun.
Well, it's like organization, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we started when I said like I was doing the closet organization. It's like, so that's what I should be doing. Why am I doing anything else? I should just, who wants to hire me? I'll organize your closet. I'll like, I don't know, organize your computer files, all that stuff. I love it. It soothes my anxiety.
And that's something a lot of people don't like to do. People who like things to be organized but don't like to organize.
Yeah.
You might be onto something there.
Like, you should see my closet right now. Next time you're over, I'll show you. It's a thing of beauty. Sometimes I open it just to look at it. And I'm like,
yeah,
oh,
I
so
love
nice.
I love that when you've got something like organized just right, and you just want to marvel at the beauty. You're like, stand back, Michelangelo. Like, you got nothing on this.
And then Mike's side of the closet is a complete mess. I'm going to organize it for him, I think. I asked him,
and then send him an invoice because this is your business now.
Yeah, and I said, are you gonna organize your side? He's like, no, I don't think so. He's like, you can do it. Okay, fine. It'll give me great joy.
It sparks joy for you.
Yeah.
Just like with Marie Kondo.
We didn't really touch on should that much.
No, I was just thinking that. But I mean, a lot of
it is kind of tied together. Yeah.
And so there's definitely some thoughts I have as far as shoulds go. Again, because I deal with people learning music. And like I've dealt with my own things as well, as far as thinking about things I should be doing. So I love the term shoulding yourself, or it might be like shoulding all over yourself. I can't remember.
Don't should on yourself.
Yeah, it's from Brad Stulberg from his book The Practice of Groundedness, which I've recommended on this podcast before because it's great. Highly recommend it. But yeah, that idea where we just constantly bog ourselves down with all these shoulds. And this is something I see with a lot of musicians where they're like, well, I know I should be practicing X, Y, Z, but, and it ends up just doing them a disservice, because I think whenever you have a should, it carries with it a ton of resistance.
Yeah.
Generally, it means like, this is something I should do, I don't want to do. And often it comes maybe from like this tradition, this tradition of learning music where it's like, this is how we do things, or this is what we learn, without any real connection to the context of what a person is trying to accomplish. Which is why what I've suggested is for someone to ask themselves, why might they want to do something? So we'll just use like scales as a very, very, obvious example for people like, oh, I should practice scales, but I don't do it. And so then they end up just feeling guilty rather than saying, well, why might I want to practice scales? In what ways can it support what I'm trying to accomplish? They might not have an answer for it. That's where a teacher can come in handy, because there's also many different ways to approach learning something like scales. And depending on how you approach it, it's going to give you a different kind of benefit. So, being able to ask that question just invites this curiosity. So it's no longer, oh, I should be doing this and I'm not, so I feel bad. Or I should be doing this, so I'm going to try to do this, but I procrastinate because my brain isn't really on board, because I don't really see how this is going to help me at any point. And so to be able to think, well, I might actually want to do this. Why? Oh, I can see how if I learn how to break down and understand and hear this scale, it's going to make it easier for me to play this style of music. Learning a pentatonic scale inside and out really helps with learning a lot of like your classic rock and your blues and stuff like that. It's kind of like a good starting point. Oh, and once I understand that, I can start building from there. I can learn my blues scale. I can learn, my major pentatonic, like all of that. You can see how it extends, and there's like a sort of like some logic to it. And then it's exciting. Then it's like, oh, this thing is going to help me do this thing I want. Okay, I get it now.
That's the key right there, is you need to see that. You need to have a very clear idea of what you're trying to get to, I think, in order for you to combat that kind of resistance.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've had that. So I've had that experience, in the past. I've always thought like I should work out. I should
Hmm.
exercise more. I should move my body. And I never do because
Yeah.
there's like the should, but I don't want to. And then I should, but I'm not. And the guilt
Hmm.
and that it all kind of works together to create this great big mental block and you never really come past it. But recently I started working out again and there's been very little resistance. And part of it is because I'm working with a personal trainer. So there's that built in
Mm.
accountability. The other reason is because I've been having issues with my ankles and my knees and my feet. And I've been kind of hobbling around like an old lady. So for me, I have like in the past, the motivating factor was never strong enough. Like the motivating factor wasn't because I wanted to get strong or wanted to be healthy. It was because I wanted to look a different way to fit in better, which is not a
Yeah.
strong enough motivating factor.
No.
That's not gonna drive you. That's like that's not gonna help you jump over the barrier of that should and that guilt and that shame. Like it's not strong enough. Whereas now it's much why might I want to? Well, because then I can work on my ankle strength and my foot strength so that I can walk better, so that I'm not having the pain in the knee, and so that I can continue to do physical activities that I might want to engage in, so that I'm, so that I'm not damaging my body as I sit all day in my desk,
Hmm.
so that I have good strength, good muscle, so that as I get older, I can maintain my physical wellness, like all these things, and that is so it's all of a sudden that resistance is pretty much gone. Like there's still a bit of
Hmm.
it, but because it's yeah, like I have finding that motivating factor is really I think important.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important to tie that. First of all, I'm so glad you've got a personal trainer and that you've got an exercise thing going because I bet you're probably feeling better. I don't
Oh
know how
yeah, it's
long you've been at it, but
crazy how it's just been a week. The two things I've noticed is that I've been very hungry. um but then my energy is like that's the thing that's crazy is I don't have to in the past like going out to run an errand or whatever like I'd have to drag myself like I really don't want to I don't feel like doing anything like I'd be so lethargic but my energy and my motivation to go out and get stuff done is like way higher than it has been over the past like year probably so
yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, that you've tied it to something meaningful to you is so essential.
so and I think that might be so if you're really struggling with the like oh I shoulds and you're not following through and stuff which is like I've been there so many times i think I think that's where you have to take some time like don't beat yourself up don't try to deal with any guilt that you're feeling around the fact that you're not doing this thing that you feel like you should be doing and instead focus your energy on trying to figure out like what is the intrinsic motivation here and
Hmm.
really because your intrinsic motivation might not be strong enough and that might be
Yeah.
the problem and again like no shame in that it's just you've got some work to do there
Yeah.
like a good example right now for me is like my diet is terrible and every day it's like oh I should eat healthier and every time I think that for whatever reason, it's not just resistance. I want to do the opposite. And I end up indulging. And I think I indulge because I feel this guilt and my I am eat emotionally. So it's like
Hmm.
so I feel like I should be eating better. I feel guilty that I'm not. And I deal with that guilt by eating crap food. It's like a really messy thing that I have to unpack.
Yeah, it's like again to tie it back to music in practicing and learning. It's like somebody who knows who's like I should practice, and they feel so bad about it that they go and like spend all their time on social media because
Yeah.
it temporarily numbs that guilt, that anxiety, but then it's very like self-destructive and counterproductive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important to have that internal locus of control. Like to make sure you're the one who's calling the shots because it's important to you versus just trying to do all these things for external reasons. It just
Well,
it's not sustainable.
yeah, and I think that's if your motivation isn't strong enough, like that's a good indication that your motivation might not actually have anything to do with you.
Hmm.
And like in the past, again, like
That's
in
super powerful. Yeah.
yeah, in the past, my motivation to exercise wasn't strong enough because it didn't actually
Hmm.
have anything to do with me. I didn't want to exercise because it was good for me.
Hmm.
Like that wasn't I mean, I know that's the case, but that's not why it was important to me.
Yeah.
And it was important to me because I felt like I didn't have the right kind of body. And I didn't do it because it wasn't actually important to me, really. Like,
Yeah.
it was important to what I thought society wanted. So until the thing is important to you, I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, because you can do the right things for the wrong reasons.
Right.
And I'll use exercising as my example because I had a really unhealthy relationship with exercise for a lot of years. Because as much as I began exercising out of this genuine place of just wanting to do it, it's something that always resonated with me. It did get to a point eventually where like being in shape was one of the things that I used to justify my value. And so if I
Right.
didn't exercise, I felt horrible because I'm like, that's it. I'm like losing my value. Like, because it was kind of a combination of how my body looked plus just the act of being like disciplined. I was like getting up at 5 and
Right.
like grinding out hit workouts. And it was like, look how intense I am. And it was like this notable thing, but I was just exhausted constantly. And so it was like the right thing from the outside. You can say, "Oh, hey, you're exercising and
You're
you're in
taking
good shape."
care of
Like,
yourself. Yeah.
but I was torturing myself.
Yeah.
Now my relationship with working out is completely different, super healthy. I love it. I've changed the kind of workout I do. My mentality around it is completely transformed. So now it's not, I don't love my body because of the things I do for it. I do the things for my body. I do these things because I love myself and my body.
Right.
It's a very different place to come from. So a lot of my life from the outside probably looks pretty similar. Like I do a lot of the same things in terms of just like being active and all of that, but the internal experience is totally different. So if I go 2 or 3 days not doing a workout and maybe I just go for like a little walk and do some stretching, I don't feel guilty at all because
Yeah.
I'm trying to support my body for the long haul. I know it has to be sustainable. So if I feel myself getting tired, I've been doing maybe really intense workouts, I just dial it back down because that's one thing too is I would burn myself out and then I wouldn't be able to work out because I was just so tired. So now it's much easier to do regular exercising because I'm paying attention to how I feel. I'm trying to support myself, my mental and physical and emotional well-being. So it makes it much easier to dial back because it's not like my value depends on working out for an hour. It's just doing something to take care of myself. And often, yeah, that is some kind of exercise, but it's not make or break it for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the note that I have about the should creates a sense of guilt and
Mm-hmm.
shame. And that those two emotions, I do believe guilt and shame, they have no place in creating.
100%.
And
Yeah.
so if you're feeling, and I've had this experience with painting where I feel this like I should be doing this, or the guilt and the shame around not doing it enough or whatever, it has no place. So if you're in a position where you're a creative of some kind and you're feeling a lot of that, like you got to deal with that stuff because
Mm-hmm.
it will just you can't have it. It'll crush you and it'll prevent you from
Mm-hmm.
engaging.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's very easy to assume that the barrier to entry when it comes to doing something we think we should do, we think it's just a matter of willpower. But it's like generally there's going to be some kind of emotional block, likely around the fact that
Yeah.
we think we should do it.
Can
It
we
it's
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
no, you first.
I was just saying, can we actually cancel the concept of willpower? Because that has plagued me my entire life. I've felt like
Yeah.
someone who just has no willpower because of my challenges with weight and well, my challenges with everything, really.
Yeah.
I feel like it's because I don't have willpower. I can't force myself. Like, I hate that concept with a fiery passion.
So we're adding it to our cancellation board. We have
Okay,
we have
perfect.
now we have now canceled willpower. It is not something you can rely on because humans are so much more complex than that.
Yes. And like I appreciate you saying like there is more, if you're not doing something, it's not because you're weak and you lack
No,
willpower.
of course
It's
not.
because there's some emotional work you need to do there. You can't just push yourself and force yourself through. There's some other stuff you got to do. And to anyone telling you that it's just because you lack willpower, like it's such a terrible thing to say to someone. It's so dismissive.
it's like telling somebody just to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, as if
Yeah,
there's so much more involved
right.
to succeeding. Like,
Or like, someone who struggles with depression. Oh, well, maybe just try smiling for 30
just be
seconds a
happy.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe try being happy. It's not the way it works. And there's some people where a thing just takes it. There's some people where, I'm just going to continue using exercise as an example.
Yeah, sure.
Where going for a run, it just takes them a little bit. They do have to kick their ass a bit, right? Like, it's just a little bit of a nudge. There is a bit of willpower that they need to kind of get out there and go. But there's other people, it's not just a little nudge. It's not just a little kick in the butt. Like, there is more that they have to do to get themselves out the door for various reasons. And it could be because the last time they went for a run, someone yelled out the window and screamed and told them that they were, like,
yeah,
you don't know. Like, what's easy for one person is not necessarily easy for another person. Some people, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get that 100%. It's so easy to discount the weight of our inner worlds and how much of an impact that has, because we can't see what somebody else is going through. So I think we've talked about this before, where, you can look at somebody from the outside and think they're being lazy, but for them, internally, just the act of getting up in the morning,
they've had to work 10 times as hard as anyone else. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's so much to it. And there's definitely strategies that you can use, but it's always about trying to find what works in the moment. There's this one I've been using. I've been following Mel Robbins for a little while. She's like a speaker and a writer, and she has this 5-second rule. So she talks about how if you can do a countdown when you get like the inspiration to like go for a walk or go for a run, before your brain has the chance to talk you out of it, you do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you go.
Yeah.
So I've been doing that to like get up in the morning, to get working on something if I'm feeling a little bit of resistance, maybe especially if I'm tired. I just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then I just do it. And it's really helpful. If that ever stops working, I know there's probably something else going on. So that's the time when you can stop and go, maybe I need a little rest. Maybe the reason I don't feel like running today is because I've been running every day for weeks and I need to have a proper rest day, or I was up late, with a sick dog or something. Like that happened to me. It used to happen to me a lot, where I'd have a bad night with my dog and it was just a struggle to get through the day. Like that stuff happens. And then it's not a matter of, any kind of strategy. It's just having like grace for yourself and that self-compassion to go, I don't need to do this today. If you're making excuses for yourself every single time, that's something to investigate too. Again, it might come down to like, is this really important to me, or is it that I just don't have my internal justification yet? So yeah, there's so many layers to it. And I think a lot of it comes down to just being in this regular conversation with yourself, to be in tune enough with yourself that you know what you're feeling, what you're thinking, that you can kind of figure it out. Or, don't put that pressure on yourself to figure it out. Maybe it's okay that you just don't feel like doing this right now. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah. I like that idea of just like when inspiration strikes, or when that inclination, like to just hop on that and not think too much about it. I've definitely had that. I'll have that with painting, right? Where it's like, and it's such a fascinating thing to experience, because it's like, I'll be inspired to just paint for whatever, and I think about it just a little too long. I hesitate, and usually because it's like, oh, but then I have to get out my canvases and my studio is a mess, or there's like these things in place that kind of are enough to deter me. But it is interesting how fleeting that moment is. And so if you don't capitalize on it, you end up not doing it.
Yeah. Because we probably get that inspiration way more than we give ourselves credit for, because we don't follow through on it enough, because it is so fleeting. It's like it's there and then it's gone. So like, yeah, if you can tune into when that happens, and then go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and just go into it. And that's also where having good habits and systems is really helpful as well. So we talked about this in our habits episode, where you want to reduce the amount of friction it takes for you to get from wanting to do the thing to doing the thing. Yeah. That could be where if you have that impulse, you do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you go to paint and then you realize there's all these things that are in the way. That's something worth taking note of, to go, these things really slowed me down. So I was able to bypass my brain thinking me out of doing this thing, but there were all these actual physical barriers to me getting there, quicker. And you know, if maybe the impulse is strong enough that that doesn't matter, but if it's like a continuous issue, that's always worth investigating. It's one of those things that you can solve that issue, and then it won't be a problem the next time.
Yeah. Yeah, my little personal mantra is Robyn just does things now. Like that's
I love that.
Yeah, that came up in therapy last year because she's like, you just have to, like, you can't think about it. You just have to do it. You just do things. That's what you do now. You just do things. And I like it. And so there's certain things that I'll kind of, particularly like those larger kind of like, I don't know. Well, I mean, personal training was kind of one of them, was like, I just do things now, so I'm going to do this.
I feel like that'd be a great like segment for our podcast. Like Robyn does things now, and they'll be like this is what I did.
I love the way it sounds too. I just do things now.
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
It's like,
I just do things now. That's just what I do.
Like you're just getting caught up with a friend, and it's like Robyn does things now. Always referring to yourself in the third person.
Yeah. Well, I also just like it for like something that might be really random. Like I'm thinking about doing acting classes in the fall.
Nice.
And it's like anyone might like, what compelled you? Like, I just do things now.
Like what a great way to be. Just do it. Just do it. Doesn't need to make sense beyond it's just something you felt inspired to do. If you're curious or interested or inspired, I always think that is justification enough to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it doesn't have to be for a long time either. It can just be like this random thing that you try a few times, and then you're like, okay, done with that.
Yep.
Moving on.
Cool. Any last thoughts? I feel like we covered a lot.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I feel like we covered a lot. I like that we canceled the concept of willpower. That's great.
Yeah, we really need to have like an official bulletin board up with just all our cancellations. We have to, this is something I know we've talked about before, is like starting a website. That'll be one of the things on our website. We'll have a page like everything we've canceled.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
I think we're up to 4 or 5 things at this point.
I think willpower is probably the thing that I'm most excited about canceling.
Yeah.
Because that's the one that's most irritating. Because you always see people, particularly on LinkedIn, like talking about like, powering through and willpower and blah, blah. And I'm like, ugh. Like, are you not tired? Do you not like listen to yourself and just get exhausted by the stuff you're spewing?
Yeah.
Apparently I have a lot of feelings about this. We should do a whole episode on me just raging about LinkedIn and the things you see there.
I'd be down for that. I spend no time on LinkedIn. So it'd be very interesting.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing.
We could do an episode on alternatives to willpower.
Yeah.
That might be one to think about. We might have just kind of solved it anyways today, but if we want to go dive in deeper, because I'm sure a lot of people are feeling very exhausted at the idea that they just need more willpower and they can't seem to find it because it's not really there.
Yeah, and then it's like, what do you do with that, right? So it's like, I need willpower. Oh, I don't have it. Okay, well, I guess I'll just feel like a completely like terrible human being, which is where I was for a lot of years, where I'm like, I just don't have any willpower because I suck. It's like, well, that's helpful. Oh man.
Yeah. I think willpower is overrated. I don't think lazy is a thing. There's always something deeper. Calling somebody lazy is just a lazy explanation. It's like somebody who doesn't care to like see somebody else's humanity and recognize that maybe they got something else going on. You know, if you like genuinely want to help, if you just want to judge somebody, well, obviously you've got some work to do. But if you're somebody who wants to help somebody else, just telling them to just do it isn't all that coupled. So having like a little mantra, a little phrase, you know, like that gets you to take action, I think is helpful, but there's got to be the other work involved too. Otherwise it's not going to be sustainable, I think.
Yeah. Agreed. So what do you have going on for the next couple of weeks?
Doing more of the blogging. So I did relaunch my blog last week. I've got one that another post for tomorrow that I finished. I just have to like finish it up, but like it's been written. And then getting on the YouTube train. I'm doing a lot of songwriting too. So I've sort of like I finished up some of the stuff I was practicing. So I'm sort of like dialing back on that a little bit to focus more on the, I guess what you'd call like content creation and my album stuff. So that's kind of where my head's at right now. I feel like any more than that, and I'm just going to overwhelm myself, because I also like want to do the career stuff and like really like I have a lot of clarity now about what I want to do for lessons. So I'm just like gung-ho on that stuff. I just want to do the stuff that'll be like more career forward, and I'll get back into the practicing maybe more seriously come the fall. Like I'm still practicing, it's just much more subdued.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it.
Cool.
What about you?
I don't really have anything planned. It's been busy couple of weeks with just things around the house and stuff. I think I don't have anything. Yeah, I don't have anything specific planned, but I have been kind of kicking around the idea of, I've been kicking around this idea forever of doing like an art workshop. And I'm kind of toying with the idea of just looking for a space to rent and setting a date. And then just going from there, because it's like I've been circling around this idea. I have a lot of like concepts for what I would do throughout the workshop. So I don't have any doubt that I'll be able to pull something together. But I think for me, I have this kind of tendency to, I feel like I need to have everything in place and a plan in place. And I think for people who are the opposite, who just like always are impulsive, then they need to step back and put a plan in place first. But for people who always put the plan in place and then they're like the opposite of impulsive, and then things never happen for years because they're too scared, they actually need to be a bit more impulsive. And so what I'm kind of learning about myself is like, I need to be a bit more of like, I know that I will figure everything out and get everything lined up and have everything in place by the time the date comes. I need to actually be impulsive, set the date, set the venue. And then work backwards. Like that has to be the way I do things, because otherwise they just never happen. So I'm that's sort of in the back of my mind as like, do I really want to do this and commit to this? And so who knows, maybe by next episode I will have established a location and a date and all that.
It's interesting that you say that, because there's a business coach that I follow, and he just recently sent out an email talking about his experience booking what I think might have been his first in-person business retreat. And he just got the inspiration while he was in an airport, and he just like started making calls to clients, like already had a bunch of spaces just booked up. He got his partner to help with the organization, just booked an Airbnb, and like it was all done. Like, and he that's the idea he's talking about, is like just sell things very quickly and then figure it out as you go. Because you know you will. That's the thing, is it's so easy when you feel like you're in this constant planning stage to keep putting things off until it's like perfect, but you learn by doing. So if you can just commit to something, you'll bring it together. It's like having that trust in yourself and your ability and your value, that everything will come together.
Well, and for me, I need the accountability, because like in an ideal world, I would prefer to have people registered for this thing before I actually find a location. But the thing is I'm not gonna, like, because there's that fear there of even doing this in the first place. There's too much resistance around marketing this. So in an ideal world, I would market first, get people to sign up, and then book a space. But I'm like, well, I'm just gonna have to do it the other way around, and that's fine. And like worst case scenario, I don't sell any, like no one buys this workshop or whatever, no one signs up. And then it's like I've, lost some money, but it's fine. I can just use that space to do other stuff. I don't know. So anyways, got to start somewhere. And this kind of seems like the launching off point. So we'll stay tuned. I don't know if I'll have moved anything forward by the next time, but that's kind of just, those are thoughts that are starting to circle.
I think that'd be really exciting. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening. You can send questions and comments to streamofartpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram. We are at streamofartpodcast. You can follow each of our individual Instagrams if you are so inclined. The links will be in the show notes. And there is also a link to our Discord channel that you can join. I am trying to be more active there. I just did a couple of posts over the last week. So, feel free to join. And I think that's it. Say no to willpower. And we will see you all in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.